Hi everyone, welcome back to the Civrays InMoov, where you can follow along with my progress at building an InMoov robot. I thought we'd just take a little bit of a recap on where we are with the build. We've got the torso assembly basically built. We've got the main torso and then it's sitting on top of the top stomach, so we've got the tilt mechanism of the top stomach working. Over the last couple of videos we refitted and reviewed the shoulders. We checked them out and we're sort of reasonably happy that they're all working okay. We have got the biceps attached on as well. We haven't looked at them lately, but there should be no problem with those, and they're both on there. And then we were going to make a decision at the end of the last video on what to do next, which was either to attach the forearms on or to work on the back covers. Now, I would like to get the forearms on because they are ready, but I feel like once I put them on, I'm going to want to get them moving. So I think we need to take another review on the electrical system. You can see I've removed the Arduino there on the bench. I'll just go over those with you on the bench. I want to talk to you a little bit about some ideas that I've got. You can see I'm doing things a little bit non-standard. I'm not using the InMoov Nervo boards. I've decided to build my own boards on top of the Arduino Megas. These are the Megas. Got the Arduino Mega underneath here on the lower layer, and then my custom board on top. You can see I've built a second one up, so we've got like a reverse image of the first one, more or less. So these two Arduinos could be fixed onto the robot. Now I've also got these new batteries. They're 4,000 milliamp hours each, so there's two of them. They're basically 3S LiPos, but they're actually called 3S2P. They're 3 cells in series and 2 cells in parallel, so they're kind of twice as thick as my previous batteries because they're kind of like 2 batteries paralleled together in one big block. So there's actually 6 cells in each of these. So with the 2 of them, we've actually got 12 cells. They should give us a combined capacity of 8,000 milliamp hours. I'm not sure what that's going to equate to. I have done some rough sums in my head on how much time they're going to give us operating the robot. I'm hoping that they're going to give us at least half an hour of sort of good continuous use, and ideally a lot longer if we're just sort of using the robot for light duties like just talking to the robot rather than actually moving the arms and things around. They should be more than capable of delivering all the current we need. It's just a question of how long they will actually last. But my smaller one lasted at least half an hour, yeah, given that we only had sort of part of the robot operating. So I'm hoping that once we've got all of the robot operating, these will be enough. But if they're not, we can always just swap them out for bigger ones. I had previously been using this small Castle Beck. It's rated at 10 amps, but you see there it says 10 amps peak. You can tell by the size of it and how thin the wires are. It's not really rated at 10 amps for continuous use. So it's got us sort of by up to this point, but I think it's come time to move up to something a little bit bigger. What I've got in mind is these buck converters. I've got 2 of them. They are actually rated at 12 amps each, and I think looking at them, they're probably a little bit more believable that they will be able to deliver the 12 amps continuously. And with the 2 combined, that'll give me 24 amps. So again, they may not do the whole robot, but I'm hoping that there'll be at least enough for now. We'll probably keep the Castle Beck as well, because we can operate at 2 different voltages then. I'll have these for the servos and the big heavy stuff operating at maybe as high as 7 volts. I'm not exactly sure how high I'll push the voltage, but we can go above 6 volts. And then I'll keep the Castle Beck down at maybe 5 volts. It'll probably feed the things like the NeoPixel ring for now. And potentially in the future, maybe Raspberry Pi or something like that. I may even get either another one of these or some more BECs to power different things at different voltages. The problem I've got at the moment is getting all of this stuff, the two Arduinos, the two buck converters, and some sort of terminals to connect everything together. I've somehow got to figure out how to wire all this stuff up and get the big XT60 connectors on the batteries all connected up. And I don't know exactly quite how I'm going to design that and where everything's going to fit on the robot. So what I really wanted to get out of the way was those back covers, because once I get the back covers on, that'll give me a good idea of how much space we've got to position these various things in the robot. So I've got the covers laid out here on the bench. It's a little hard to get it all in one shot. Apologies, I haven't got the names of every single part here, but you can look all of this up on the InMoov.fr website. So you can see we've got a complete set of the back covers. We've got the battery doors here, and this should cover everything and just leave us the hole where a tablet would normally go. My intention, if it will fit and if I can make it work, is to use a custom touchscreen display in here and probably print out my own 3D printed frame to go around it that will make it fit in here. So that'll be a little project for another day that will keep me interested. Regarding the battery door, we've got this little connector here that connects the two halves together, and then there's another one supposed to go across here on the outside. I think this one goes at the top on the inside, and then we've got this one at the bottom on the outside. And I think I've got to do something custom here, probably just make a flat bracket that will fix the two together, nice and simple, just because I didn't want the little clip that sticks out the back, which is designed for a power bank, a USB sort of power bank for extra battery power. But I don't want that, so I'm just going to print something sort of nice and simple across the back to join them together. Other than that, the back is pretty standard. As I said, I will do something custom in here, but that'll be for another day. But before we attach the covers together and get them on the robot, what we've also got is these, I think they're described as holders. They're kind of brackets, really. These will need gluing into the back of the torso. They have these little pegs in them that will push into the back of the torso, and then we can glue them in place. And then I think pretty much each one contains a space for a nut. They look like they're M4 nuts. You can see kind of just down in there, the hexagon shape was where our nut will go. So we'll need to get nuts glued into those and get these glued onto the robot, onto the torso, sorry. And then I've done something a little custom here as well. This is like a central pillar as a central support for the back covers. I think that will fix into kind of like right here in the very center of the back. I've stuck with the standard support across here, but I've made some custom brackets on the end, which are just simplified versions. Normally these have clips which retain the battery that Gael uses on his version. I think they're lead acid batteries, 6-volt lead acid batteries, which I'm not going to be using, so I didn't want the clips. So I've just created some custom brackets in here, and they again got the little pegs on them, so they'll push into the back of the torso, and then the standard pillar can fit into those. You get the idea. So if you want those parts, let me know. I'll stick them on Thingiverse if anyone's interested. So I think what the plan is going to be is clean up these little brackets, get them fixed onto the back of the torso. Then we can start work on cleaning up all of these back covers, and we'll glue each piece together and attach it onto the torso as we go. So we won't glue it all together and then try and attach it onto the back. We'll work on one piece at a time and attach it onto the back of the robot as we go. I think that's generally the advice on how you should put these together. And then once we've got all the back covers on, we'll be able to see how much room there is for all this stuff. So we'll start with just cleaning all these little bits up. Got to get the brim and all the support material off them. So these bigger ones go at the top, the medium-sized ones go in the middle, and the small ones go at the bottom. Again, you can just check all that out on the InMoov.fr website. So I have actually got some support material in where the nuts go. We'll need to clean that out as well. These supports just break off. Can normally get that out with a screwdriver. Just literally come out. Use it nice and clean. There's another one of those. Yeah, these ones are down in here. You can see all the support comes off nice and easy. Clean these up properly in a minute. So the quickest and easiest way to clean off the brim is just to scrape along with a knife. It comes off easily and cleanly, and that avoids damaging the nice 3D printed faces. If you're using a file, you kind of risk scratching up those nice clean edges. I mean, I'm going to paint all of mine, so it doesn't really matter, but if you're not intending to paint it, you probably want to see all these nice shiny edges. So the larger one goes at the top, like I said. There are two holes. I'll show you on this side. This one here and this one here. and then the 2 pegs on the back slot into those holes. It's fairly obvious where those 2 go, they can't fit anywhere else. Then down in the middle, we've got the sort of the middle-sized one, fits in here. The nut goes to the inside with a hole on the outside, and then we've got the very small one right down at the bottom here, again with the nut on the inside and the hole on the outside. Now these ones you can get in the wrong positions. There are actually 2 more holes here and here, but it's the one just below the servo that you want, and the one right at the bottom of the torso down there. So I've just pushed these in as a dry fit to make sure that they will fit before I've glued them, but what I'll do now is I'll pull them out, put some glue on them and push them back in, and I'll get the other side done as well. And then finally we've got this centre pillar with my 2 custom brackets on the sides. Now this one we can glue it in place, but we can also drill and screw through these holes here. There's no holes in the back of the torso, you do have to drill through. So I actually drilled through with a 2.5mm drill bit and then used number 6 by 1/2 inch screws. I didn't over tighten them because there's no holes in the back of the torso. You're just drilling straight through sort of the skin of the 3D printed parts. There isn't anything solid to screw into, so don't over tighten the screws because you will just wring them off. I did super glue my nut inside the back of here before I put this part on, because I thought that would be a little tricky to get to the back of that one. The rest I think will be okay. We can put the nuts in as we go. So I'm going to start at the top, and the first part I'm going to put on is this piece. That should go in roughly there. Looks like there's a hole here that's going to fit through and fix onto this fixing here, and then there's a lug in the back here which is going to locate into that hole there. So that looks like how this part fits on. What we'll have to do is clean up all the support material and get the brim off, and I'll just make sure that the pieces that go next to it fit into the dovetail joints before I actually attach this part on. So what I've done here, I've just got the nut in the back there, if you can just see that down in there, and then I've put a bolt through just temporarily, tightened it up, and it pulled the nut into the hole. It was a nice tight fit. I didn't have to drill out this part at all. Everything was already a perfect fit. So I'll take this screw out and we'll get the proper back bracket put on there. So that's a 25mm long screw. You can see it's just poking out the back. It's probably about where we want it actually. So that is about the right length screw. And you just got this top edge here fitting sort of snugly. It is just sitting below the torso. There's a little notch here, looks like it's to allow for the potentiometer holder to move into that as the arm swings up. And we can see it's quite a snug fit against the servo, but there is a nice amount of clearance in there. So as usual, Gael has done a fantastic job of designing these parts. Not quite sure what this hole is for. There's quite a large hole there. It doesn't look like a screw hole. Can't see any real reason for it. If anyone knows what that hole is for, leave us a comment. So we've got a small problem, but I think we can get over it. I've got this side on now. That was exactly the same as the other side. That's screwed in there and plugged into the back just here. I've put this centre piece in, and this joint here is actually a really nice fit. And the camera doesn't show it up very well, but that's a nice smooth finish on that, and it's all fitting nicely. I think I will have to just tape it in position and glue it. It's not glued yet. This side is not quite as good a fit, and unfortunately you can see part of it snapped off. It's just the layer separation here, and that piece has fell out, but I don't think it's a real problem. I can glue that back in. I've still got the piece, and we can probably glue that in. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this one, tape it in position so it doesn't move, or clamp it, and then let that dry, and then come back and look at this side when we're happy that this one's not moving around. I think we can get over that. That's not a huge problem. I could even carry on and start doing some of the lower parts before we actually glue that piece up. So what I'm actually finding to be quite a challenge with these back covers is removing all the support material. The next part we've got here, I've got some of it off around here, but there's still a big section of it in the back here. This section here and that piece up there all needs to be removed, and I've actually cracked the part. I think I could just about salvage it at the moment, but if it cracks any more we might have to reprint this one. It's a little difficult to see where it is, but it's actually cracked all the way along here to about this point. So I need to be really careful when I'm pulling this last piece of support off not to crack it further. If it doesn't crack any further, then I can probably put some glue on it, probably across the back wherever the crack turns out to be, and then maybe clamp it down and let it set. We might get away with it. Failing that, we'll have to reprint this part. So there you can kind of see where the crack is. It runs from there to about here. Now if I can glue it back together, it shouldn't look any different to any of the other layer lines. So I've got the next part on the centre part here in the back. That's screwed into that pillar there. Not totally happy with this joint. It's quite a nice fit actually, but because of this crack across here, this part which I was explaining to you earlier cracked, it's not sitting quite flat here. But I'm going to carry on. I think if I keep fiddling with it, I'm just going to make it worse. And I think the solution, if I really do want to clean it up, is to replace that part with a new one. But we'll just carry on for now. It is going together reasonably well. I am wondering whether, because I had this piece crack off, and that's kind of like layer separation, and the same with this crack across here, it's sort of layer separation again. I am actually wondering whether this plastic, this is a Sunlu plastic, is maybe not giving me very good layer adhesion, as we've had two pieces crack already. I've not really seen that on other areas of the robot. This stuff seems, how do I explain it? It's sort of quite hard plastic, whereas some of the other parts, like this part here, feels like a softer plastic. This feels more brittle, whereas this feels like it's got a bit more give in it. This was actually a lovely white colour as well, and this is slightly a sort of glossy, shiny finish to it, which I don't like as much. I can't really find a good PLA. I think the next lot of plastic I buy, I will try PETG. Everyone is recommending using PETG, and I'm having a few parts break here, and I think maybe PETG would have been better. So that's the next piece on, this piece here. This bolt was particularly difficult to locate into the nut. I don't know why they're quite so awkward. The other one, the other side, was a little tricky, but this one was more difficult. It's gone together reasonably well. Obviously we've got this piece broken here. I'm going to see if I can glue that. I might just reprint the middle part, I don't know yet. This joint is quite nice, and this one's not quite as good. There's a little gap at the bottom here. It sort of feels like it wants to be pushed up a little bit. So if you push it up, you actually get a bit of a gap at the top. And you let it go, you get a bit of a gap at the bottom. But you know, maybe I'm being too fussy. This joint here is quite nice. This one, it's gone in quite well. So it's going together reasonably well. I don't know if I've made a mistake by not fitting these side pieces first. We'll find out in a minute. So I've come back to the bench, I've taken this part off, and I'm going to try and attach these two parts together and then join them onto the robot as one single piece, as these nuts and bolts here were proving a little tricky. I've actually drilled out the holes, this hole, this one, and these two here, at 4.5mm to give me a little bit more clearance. One thing that's a little annoying with this is, I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but the hole that takes the nut is quite a long way out of position where it should really be, so the nuts are not really going to sit inside the holes. I mean, that screw even wants to come even further over to the left as we're looking at it, moving it even further away from the hole. So that's a little annoying. We have the option of just fitting them on the back like that, it's not a problem. Just would have preferred it if they'd sat down inside those hexagon recesses. So what I've done, I've got the nut down there in the hole. I put a washer on this bolt so the head didn't dig into the plastic, and then I tightened it up. You can see it's pulled the nut down into the hole, but the point I'm trying to make is if you look at how much of an angle that screw is sitting at, on the one side it's sort of nice and tight against the washer here, and then on the other side there's quite a large gap. But I wanted to get that nut down in that hole because one of the reasons is I wanted to see if I could get away with a shorter bolt, because I've got two size M4 bolts. Some of them are 25mm long and some of them are 13mm long. I think that's basically 1 inch and 1/2 inch. We probably want something kind of in between. So I guess probably the next size in between would be 20mm. But I don't have those, so I've just got these two, and I'm actually running out of the longer ones. The longer ones would suit everywhere, but I'm running out of them, so I want to see if I can get away with the shorter ones in some places. So it kind of worked, but I'm not happy with it, so I'm going to take it out again. The 1/2 inch screw, or the 13mm screw, is actually the perfect length to fit into that nut. It just reaches through to the other side of the nut. But the problem is, it has actually gone in there quite nicely, and I would be happy with it, but you can see the edge is quite a bit out of alignment, which is not great. And then there's the same problem on the other side. We're not aligned, so we can't really sit the bolt in there like that. I think we're going to have the nut hanging out off the back so that we can get the part over a little bit. So it's on, and that's what I've done. I've used washers on the back and not put the nuts recessed down into the holes. Just allowed me to get the alignment a little better. It's not perfect. There is still a little bit of a ridge on this joint here. This edge is not so bad, and you can't see that as much anyway, but we do have to fit the battery door in here. I've actually got the battery door here. That will fit there like that. Probably doesn't look too bad on the camera, but it's not perfect. But it'll do for now. Can always come back and refine these parts. So I'll press on and try and do the other side. So I've realised I've made a bit of a mistake, and I've corrected it here. You can see those little custom brackets I made to go in here weren't going to work. I realised that these clips are not for holding the battery in, they're actually for holding the battery door in place, so we need these clips. So I've reverted these pieces here, this one and this one, over to the standard ones from the InMoov website. The other problem I've got at the moment is I have run out of screws, so I've ordered some more, and hopefully by the magic of YouTube they'll appear in a few seconds, but we'll see. So I thought whilst I'm waiting for those screws, I'll just take a quick look at the battery cover. So I've cleaned off the support on these. The actual website says that you don't need support, but I was a little concerned with this part here. I couldn't see how, when that stood up, how that part could support itself. There's a little sort of flat on that. I mean, it might have been possible, but I was a little nervous that would droop a bit, so I put support in here, and I did add a little bit more support around, I think, this area here, but this will obviously bridge, but I couldn't see how that could bridge. So I put a little bit of custom support on that. Anyway, I've cleaned all that off, and I'm just looking at how these fit together. So this part here, I fitted 2 M3 nuts into that, and I've actually drilled out these holes here to 4mm. Well, it looks at that, it looks like maybe I've only done one and not the other, so I'll double check that in a second. Drilling out to 4mm gives me a little bit of clearance, so I can sort of fiddle around with it and try and make it straight as possible. So it should just be a case of popping that on there and putting some M3 screws through there. So they're in there, and they are 13mm screws. You can see they're just protruding through, but the slightly shorter ones at 10mm were too short, so you might get away with 12mm, but you won't get away with 10. And here is a little bracket that I've made just to fit in here. As I said before, I didn't want the clip that goes on the back of here for the USB battery bank, whatever you call them. So it's just a little bit of a simpler design. So that'll just snap in there, and I'll just put a couple of screws through that. So struggling to get some of these parts to fit, and as you saw, I did break a couple of them. We've got this one here with the little sort of lug snapped off. And I did say I was going to glue this, and I probably could have done, but I've actually lost the little piece that fell off. Decided that it's a relatively small part anyway, I may as well go ahead and print another one, so I've done that. So we've now got the ends back in place, so that solves that problem. And because it was a little tricky to sort of fit together, I've decided to actually take it off the robot, and we're going to assemble some of the parts off of the torso, and we'll join them on as sort of little assemblies. So I thought I would go ahead and glue this piece on here. That will go on there. I've got that fitting reasonably nice now, so I'll go and glue that in place. I'm just using this Loctite super glue. Put a little bit of glue on each side of the joint, pop them together, and now I've got my clamps here that we used before on the forearms. Glued down this side as well. So we have had a little bit of YouTube magic. The screws that I ordered have suddenly arrived. You can see I've got them here. They're black screws. They are M4, and I think these are more of a standard size M4 head on these, whereas the previous screws I was using, these little silver ones, seem to have a slightly undersized head, which is actually quite nice, actually fitted quite nice into the holes. These ones that have got like the standard size head actually seem a little tight, so we might have to open up some of the plastic. I'm just looking at this one here, a little annoyed with myself because I ordered 25mm screws because I know we needed some longer ones, but they're really too long. I probably should have ordered 20mm. You can see these other ones here, these are 25s as well, and this one's about right. I mean, it's slightly too long. Even that one would have probably been fine at 20mm. So doesn't really matter in most places, but this one I'm looking down here, this one here sticks out quite a long way, and that's where this switch is going to fit. I'm going to pop that switch in there. Now that's the hole for the switch, as I said before, is slightly oversized, so I'm going to make an adapter plate for that. But if I look inside at where that, it's a little hard to see because it's a black screw there. I think I could just about get away with it, but I'm tempted to just trim it down a little bit with the Dremel, just take a little bit off these ones, and they'll probably be the same issue when we come to the other side. I think just to make sure I don't cause myself a headache, I am going to trim these screws down a bit. A bit annoying, should have ordered some 20mm screws, but there we go. Right, so I took this off in the end to make it a little bit easier to fit together, and I've put all the three parts together that actually bolt together with screws rather than the glue joints. I'm not going to glue the joints off the robot. We'll glue them when we're on the robot, but I have taken it off to do all these screw joints. I've replaced the shiny silver screws with the black ones. I think the black ones do look a little better. They contrast against the white. Not totally happy with this white. It's not a nice bright white that I was hoping for. I'm not really sure what to do with this switch. I did say that I'll make an adapter plate to go in there, and I still think possibly I could. But to save myself a lot of hassle, I think for the moment I'm just going to leave it as it is. There's a tiny gap at the bottom of the switch, and there is also a tiny gap at the top. It's pretty difficult to see, but there is a bit of a gap there. The bottom seems to be worse than the top. I'm not totally convinced. You can see how there is a kind of space under the switch. I'm not totally convinced that this recessed face in here is completely flat, so if I made an adapter plate it might not sort of sit down flat anyway. So I think I'm just going to leave it as it is. I don't think that switch will fall out. It operates quite nicely. It doesn't look too bad, you know, from a distance. I don't think that looks too bad. You've got to get up fairly close to notice the imperfections. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I'm not happy with it, but it's probably good enough. These joints also, they're a little bit rough, but there's a bit of a gap in here. If you look around the back, you can kind of see there's a little gap in here as well, but I really don't think there's much I can do. I think that's just the nature of 3D printing. The parts just aren't terribly accurate. The only way I can really see of sorting this out is to paint it, is to sand it down, smooth off all the joints and fill them in and paint it. I think that's the only way you're going to get like a professional looking job. But for now I think I'm just going to leave it as is. I don't think it's too bad. Little weird here how this joint fits there. I'm not quite sure what Gael had in mind for that. And I have got a small crack here. I think I'm getting away with it, but there is a crack across here. I think I'll get away with that. So I think what I'll do is I'll build up the other side the same. I'll take that off the robot as well and build that up as an assembly like this. So two things I'm doing here to try and get this joint as nice as I can. To get the parts flush on the front face or the back, because this is the back of the robot. What I'm doing is sanding down this face here and this face here so that we can push this down a little further and get it a bit more flush. And the other thing I'm doing is to get the gap as small as possible. What I'm doing is filing the back off of these parts. If you file the front, you're actually going to make the gap bigger. They're slightly tapered, so if you file the back off, you can actually get the part to come a little lower down and get the gap smaller. Now it's not perfect, but it's a little better than it was before I did any filing. So there's this one together. I've got a nice blue switch on this side. Not sure what colour switches to put in actually. I've got one of each colour. So we saw the green one on the other side, and I've got red, sort of an amber colour, and the blue. I actually quite like the green and the blue, but maybe you prefer the red. Don't know how anyone can say they actually like amber, but who knows. Let me know in the comments what colour switch you think I should fit on the robot. I apologise, I'm kind of doing all the work off camera and then showing you as I've completed each piece. It's just difficult to hold the camera as I'm doing this work. So I've screwed this side in down here. Now the reason they tell you to assemble these parts together as you go, as you're attaching them on, you can see quite evident here. This is just quite a long way out from that block. We've got everything kind of nice and flush on all these joints here now, which is what I wanted. I wanted a nice clean finish, but you can see that you're probably supposed to have the gaps because we're a long way off on that block down there. So what I'm hoping I can do is just re-drill the hole through the block and then get a nut and bolt in there to hold that in. You can also see it wants to be pulled in quite a bit at the back, but I'll leave that until we get the other pieces in. What I've also done is I've replaced these bolts with black ones, and sorry, that's not a bolt, that's just a hole. This bolt with a black one, and I've glued this joint here now. So this one's already glued, that's the one we done on the bench. Now this one's also glued with a clamp. So the next thing I'm going to do is glue this one in here. It's not quite flush, but I'll glue it and then just push it flush and clamp it. And then I can have a go at getting the other side in on here. And that's the middle piece fitted. Again, I've glued both of these joints and then popped the screw through there. I've also glued this joint here. So the last piece to go on is this section across the back and the middle. So centre bottom was probably the word I was looking for on that bit. So they're glued now, those two joints are the last two. I've just quickly snapped in the battery cover to show you, but I'm going to remove that because I don't want it to get super glued in place. Just wanted to check that it fits, and it does, so I'm quickly going to get that out of there. But that's basically the whole back in place. The only thing I haven't done is fitted 2 screws down the bottom here, because I think I'm going to have to drill through the holes. My arms are in the way at the moment, so I can't get a drill in here. So I'll leave that for another day. But I think that's looking quite nice. So I think we'll leave that there. I think that's a good point to stop. What we'll do next time is look at fitting some of the electrics, get the Arduinos back in. So we get the Arduinos in, we can get those arms moved out of the way, and I can re-drill and fit those 2 screws that are missing at the bottom. So I'm quite pleased with that in the end. It was quite tricky, but we did get there. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help support the channel. And it really would be nice if I could see a few comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.